want to show you today how to make a two-piece mold using the Amazing Mold Putty. A lot of people do flat-sided pieces with an open pour, similar to candles, soap, chocolate, and things like that. But if you want to get into more detailed pieces that have detail not only on the front and the back, it may require a two-piece mold. I'm going to show you how to do this using the Amazing Mold Putty. First, we're going to take one part of it and we're going to kind of flatten it out. And this will help us figure out how much material we're going to need to mix up to make that mold, to make the first half of the mold. So once we know that it'll cover up pretty much half of the piece, we can wad this up into a ball and pull off the same amount of putty, and we know it'll cover the entire object. Let me walk you through the process and then I'll show you how it's done. We're going to mix equal amounts and we're going to press it over the angel, right up to the seam line where we want the two halves of the mold to separate. Once that cures, we're going to flip it over, we're going to mold release it because the putty does adhere to itself but doesn't adhere to anything else. So we're going to put some Vaseline on the putty, the cured half, and then we're going to press more putty over the back side of it. Now we'll have a mold of the front side and the back side. Then we're going to use an X-Acto knife or an Excel knife to go ahead and cut our sprues to pour the resin in, and anywhere that we might have to vent or gate to let the air release. Let me show you how this looks. Mix the putty until absolutely no swirls are seen. This takes normally about a minute. Once you have all the swirls out of it, we want to roll it into a ball to eliminate all these creases, because if we press it onto our part, the creases would be in the part. So use some pressure in your palms and roll this into a ball and get rid of all the creases. Now we have mixed putty that's ready to be pressed onto our angel. I'm going to kind of make it in the shape that the angel is so we can press the putty around. Now the trick is we only want to press the putty around the angel to the halfway point. We do not want to go past the halfway point. So we're going to roll the putty up to the halfway point. The cleaner your edge is on the part, the cleaner your seam line will be, and the easier it'll be to clean up the resin. That's where the flash comes from. You can also use a clay tool similar to this to make sure you get in and the seam lines are nice and straight. You only have about 2 to 3 minutes to do this entire process, so you don't want to lollygag. The last step we want to do is we want to add some locators. Locators can be added on the outside edge or in the middle. These locators will help the two halves of the mold align. Alright, our putty's starting to set up and we have a two-piece mold halfway done. Alright, the first half of the Amazing Mold Putty mold that we've made of the two pieces is set up and cured. It's nice and hard. We have some locators in here. The next step is to mold release it. The Amazing Mold Putty, if we mixed up more and pressed it over top, would bond to it. It's not going to bond to the angel, the ornament itself, but it would bond to itself. So we need to make sure to put some Vaseline, and we can simply do that by just smearing it around the outside edges, anywhere where the silicone is going to touch. You know, you can even take a Q-tip and just kind of wipe it in close. We don't need to get it on the angel. If we get a little bit on, it's not that big of a deal, but we do need to make sure we coat it everywhere that the silicone is going to touch itself. Alumilite Alumilite also makes two different types of mold releases if you didn't want to use Vaseline. One is a spray called our UMR, the other is a wipe on and let it dry mold release, which is called our rubber mold release. So now that we have our Vaseline, our mold release coated, we can now go ahead and mix up our next half of our silicone. Once again, we want to kind of spread this out to make sure it's going to cover half of the mold, and we have equal amounts. So we can simply just knead these together until we get all the swirls out, and then we'll press that putty around and over the second half of our mold. We're going to continue to mix the putty until, once again, all of our swirls are out, roll it into a ball, and then we can press the putty over the back side of the ornament to create the second half of the mold. Very important on the second half of the mold. We need to make sure to get the putty into the detail and to meet the seam line. So we want to make sure we're pressing it right into that seam line to get it down into the detail. This will give us a nice clean parting line and make sure we get all the detail in our angel. We also need to make sure we press it into the locators. If we wrap it around just a little bit, that'll also give some location. And now we'll just lay it down and let it cure. Within about 15 to 20 minutes, the second half will cure. We'll demold the two halves and we'll be ready to pour our part. Alright, the two halves of the mold have cured. Now we're just going to separate the two halves and remove our original. You can see where the mold's actually stuck a little bit. Maybe we didn't have any Vaseline right there. But now we have a two-piece mold that meets perfectly. And we're ready to start pouring. Well, how do we go about pouring this piece? What we're going to do is we're actually going to take an X-Acto knife. We'll probably pour from the bottom here and allow the material to flow into the head, into the tips of the wing, and everything will be released up. But if you look at the original's got some undercuts. These locks, when the material flows down and it comes up, this is going to trap air. So we need to relieve or vent the tips of these two sleeves of the angel's dress. How we're going to do that and how we're going to cut our vent where we're going to pour from in the feet is by using an X-Acto knife or an Excel knife. And all we're going to do is we're just going to cut a non-conspicuous area right out of the mold. And this is going to be the bottom of the feet. Alright, so then when we put the mold back together, you can see where we're going to start having these areas to pour from. Put the mold back together, now we have this hole. That's plenty big enough for us to pour the resin into, and it's basically going to be this nice flat area right by our feet. The feet will kind of pour, and we might have to kind of sand that out or carve it once we pull the piece out. Now we also need to work on the sleeves. The sleeves we need to vent, and how we're going to do that, we're just going to cut some small triangles to the outside of the mold, right from the sleeve. And this will give the air somewhere to escape and allow the resin to fill the sleeve. So you can see we have a vent on the side, we have our pour hole, and the other vent is right there. And that's how we make a two-piece mold of a detailed piece using the Amazing Mold. Now we're going to use some of the Amazing casting resin to actually cast the part. We've measured out equal amounts of both sides. We're going to mix it thoroughly and then pour it into the mold. Make sure to mix until there's no swirls. Scrape the bottom, scrape the sides. Now we're ready to pour the resin into the mold. We're using a piece of cardboard just in case any of the resin leaks out. So now our resin is cured. We can flex the mold, peel off the flash, and remove the angel from the mold. While the material is still curing, it's very easy to trim the flash.